the diversity, structure, and function of inverts and vertebrates. The deuterostomes also include the chordates. The chordates are represented by basal invertebrates as well as vertebrates. Chordates have typical bilateral symmetry, and as well they exhibit segmentation. Chordates in general share four common characteristics: the presence of a notochord, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, pharyngeal gill slits or clefts, as well as a postanal tail. However, it's important to note that some of these traits may only be present during the embryonic stage, leading to a great diversity in adult morphology. This phylogenetic tree shows you the relationship within the deuterostomes. Note a common ancestral deuterostome that led to the lineages of the echinoderms as well as the remaining chordates. These include the cephalochords, urochords, as well as various cyclostomes, gnathostomes, tetrapods, and amniotes. Also note the presence of the major derived traits that have occurred through the evolution of these organisms. These include the development of the notochord, development of vertebrae, a mineralized skeleton in the presence of jaws, lungs or lung derivatives that are consistent with the origin of animals onto land, the presence of lobed fins that eventually developed into tetrapods, limbs with digits, the presence of the amniotic egg, and the development of milk. The first major grouping of chordates that we will examine are the cephalochordata. Cephalochordates are blade-like shaped, and they're also called lancelets. Larvae are usually mobile, feeding on plankton in the environment, while adults are considered more sessile and burrow into the seafloor. Because of their small size and aquatic environment, gas exchange can simply occur through their integument. Food is usually drawn into the mouth using the cilia or cirri. Once food enters in with a large volume of water, this will then pass through the pharyngeal gill slits, which acts as a filtering mechanism. This will then allow the food to pass through the digestive tract before being eliminated out through the anus. Also note the presence of a notochord as well as a dorsal hollow nerve cord. The urochordates are unique as their adult structure resembles porphyras or sponges. However, if we examine their larval form, we can see the presence of a notochord, tail, dorsal hollow nerve cord, as well as a pharynx that contains slits, thus confirming that they are members of the chordate group. In the adult form, note the current of water flow. Water flow will enter into the incurrent siphon and enter into the mouth. This will then lead to the pharynx that has numerous slits to help water pass through while concentrating the food particles. The food particles will then travel through the esophagus into the stomach, into the intestinal area where nutrients will be absorbed and then be eliminated out the anus. This will then allow for the waste material to then pass out the excurrent siphon into the surrounding environment. An important derived character that occurred in the evolution of chordates is the development of vertebrae. Vertebral structures range from having small areas of cartilage that reside close to the notochord to having full vertebrae that enclose and protect the spinal cord. The development of vertebrae is also associated with an increase in genetic complexity, specifically in Hox genes, transcription factors, and various types of signaling molecules and pathways. Due to an increase in complexity, we typically see an increase in the complexity of the vertebrae themselves, the vertebrae sensory system, as well as the overall skeletal structure. Another unique feature of vertebrates involves the formation of what is termed the neural crest. The neural crest will form from ectodermally derived neural crest cells. These contain cells that lie along the edge of the neural tube that forms during embryonic development. These cells can be found dispersed throughout the embryo, and they eventually form various structures that include the teeth, skull bones, neurons, as well as sensory capsules. This slide depicts the origination and overall fate of the neural crest cells. Neural crest cells can be found on the sides of the neural tube. As the neural tube closes, these cells will then migrate to other areas of the embryo. As we can see in the picture to the lower right, we can scales form the lower jaw as well as portions of the skull. In general, the neural tube will lead to the formation of the brain and spinal cord, whereas the notochord will eventually develop into the vertebrae. The next major group of chordates we'll examine are the cyclostomes. These include hagfish and lampreys. Many of these have rudimentary vertebrae, and they also lack true jaws. Hagfish contain cartilaginous vertebrae as well as a cartilaginous skull. However, they retain the notochord in the adult form. Hagfish are typically present in marine environments and are mostly scavengers. They also have a distinct row of slime glands present on their posterior end. This will help to produce large amounts of slime if they are disturbed as a defense mechanism. Lamprey also retain the notochord in the adult form. However, their notochord is typically surrounded by a sheath with cartilaginous vertebrae. They also contain teeth as well as a tongue in their oral cavity. Lampreys can be non-parasitic or parasitic. The non-parasitic species spend most of their life cycle as larvae. They turn into mature adults only to mate and then die. Parasitic species also spend most of their life in the larval form. They typically live in freshwater streams as larvae, where they are parasitic, and then migrate to lakes and seas as adults to reproduce. Another important derived trait that originated in the evolution of chordates was the presence of jaws. Organisms that contain jaws are also referred to as gnathostomes. These include sharks and their relatives, ray and lobefin fishes, as well as amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. The development of jaws first appeared in the fossil record approximately 440 million years ago. The placoderms and acanthodians are now considered to be extinct. However, the jaws that were present in the chondrichthyans, ray and lobefin fishes, still remain in aquatic environments. Jaws were a very important development in evolution, as they can greatly assist in capturing prey. In addition, the development of fins and the supporting musculature were important in steering and moving these organisms within an aquatic environment. Paired together, these made extremely efficient predators. In addition, many of these organisms evolved what is termed the lateral line system. This is a sensory system that is present along the vertebral column of the animal. This system can be used to detect both vibrations as well as changes in pressure in the aquatic environment. It is believed that jaw bones may have originated from skeletal rods that supported the pharyngeal gill slits. The anterior rods are believed to have become jaw bones, while the remaining gill slits remained adapted for respiration in aquatic species. We're now going to take a look at some of the major groups of gnathostomes. We begin with the chondrichthyes, or sharks and their relatives. Many of these will have a cartilaginous skeleton. However, some may have calcium or bone deposits within their internal structures. Most of these animals are planktivorous, feeding on plankton in the aquatic environment, or they may be carnivorous and consume other animals. Carnivorous sharks typically have sharp senses and teeth to aid in predation. This means they have sharp eyes for vision, nostrils for smell, and as well they have a lateral line for sound detection. Most rays are considered to be bottom-dwelling feeders and feed on mollusks and crustaceans. As a result, they tend to be flattened with enlarged pectoral fins and whip-like tails that they can use for defense purposes. An important adaptation in sharks is the ability to store oil in their liver. This greatly aids in the ability to regulate their buoyancy. As a result, some sharks need to keep moving in order to prevent sinking. However, some sharks and also rays are bottom-dwelling. As a result, they need to maintain water flow over their gills for respiration. They typically do so by opening and closing their mouth and forcing the water over their gills. Fertilization occurs internally. However, there are various modes of development. Development can be oviparous, where eggs are laid and hatch externally, ovoviviparous, where eggs develop internally, and viviparous, where live embryos are born and the embryo will develop within a uterus. The next major group we will look at is the osteichthyans. Osteichthyans are also a clade within the gnathostome group. This includes most vertebrate species, such as your ray and lobefin fishes, as well as tetrapods. Osteichthyans contain ossified or bony endoskeletons. Bony fish include both the ray and lobefin fishes. Bony fish will possess an air-filled swim bladder for buoyancy. However, this swim bladder can also exchange gases with the circulatory system in order to maintain a constant volume. It is now thought that this swim bladder originally derived from lung-like tissue. Bony fish also have skin with mucus glands and are usually covered in bony scales to reduce drag when moving in an aquatic environment. Bony fish also possess a lateral line system, as we've seen in sharks and their relatives. Most bony fish are oviparous, however some can be ovoviviparous or viviparous. Bony fish include your rayfin and lobefin fishes. This slide depicts the major characteristics of both of those groups. Rayfin fishes have various types of adaptations that allowed for a very diverse body shape, and as well a fin structure that can be used for both locomotion, defense, as well as reproductive purposes. Lobefin fishes are now mostly extinct. However, there are three extant lineages, the coelacanth lungfish, as well as tetrapods. Lobefin fishes are named due to the presence of pectoral and pelvic fins that are adapted to have very thick muscle layers surrounding rod-shaped bones. These eventually led to the evolution of the tetrapod limb. Another major group within the gnathostomes include the tetrapods. These include the amphibians, reptiles, as well as mammals. Tetrapods include most of the limb-bearing terrestrial species. It is believed that tetrapods evolved about 365 million years ago from an ancestral lobefin fish that migrated onto land. After this migration occurred, there was great diversification of body form as well as function. Tetrapods share many derived characters, however some of these characters may be secondarily lost. These derived characters include the presence of limbs with distinct digits, cervical vertebrae that allow for movement of the skull, the fusion of pelvic bones to form a pelvic girdle that can greatly support walking on land, and the reduction or loss of gills. In fact, gills may only be present during the embryonic stages and completely absent from the adult stage. This slide depicts the major characteristics of an ancestral fossil called Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik was present approximately 375 million years ago and is the fossil of an extinct species of lobefin fish. It is important as it contains both fish-like characteristics as well as tetrapod characters. Note the presence of a humerus, ulna, as well as wrist bones. This is important in understanding the development of the tetrapod limb and the movement of tetrapods onto land. It is believed that many of the early tetrapods appeared along the shallow coastal regions during the Devonian period. Fins may have allowed for distinct walking movement in brackish-type waters. Eventually, limbs evolved from this pre-existing body plan through descent with modification. Note the similarities in the limb bones that are present in lungfishes all the way to amphibians as well as amniotes. One of the major groups of tetrapods includes the amphibians. These include the following orders or clades. The urodels are represented by the salamanders. They retain their tail from the larval into the adult stage. Frogs or anurans, on the other hand, lose their tail and resorb their gills and develop limbs as they take the adult form. Caecilians, or members of the order Apoda, have secondarily lost their limbs. As a result, these amphibians will typically burrow into the tropical moist soil. Another important trait in the evolution of tetrapods is the evolution of the amniotic egg. This allowed for the embryo to survive in more harsher terrestrial environments. The The amniotic egg is present in both reptiles as well as mammals. It is believed that the amniotic egg evolved approximately 350 million years ago. The egg contains extraembryonic membranes, such as the allantois that collects waste, the chorion that allows for gas exchange, the amnion that protects the embryo, and the yolk sac that provides nutrients. Please examine the diagram to the right to see the overall organization of a typical amniotic egg. This diagram represents the current phylogeny of both extinct and extant amniotes. Note the presence of an ancestral amniote that then diverged into the diapsids and the synapsids. The synapsids eventually led to the evolution of mammals, while the diapsids led to both extinct and extant species and representatives such as the turtles, crocodilians, birds, as well as the lepidosaurs such as tarturas and squamates. Also note the presence of the extinct species, which are denoted by the cross. One of the major groups of amniotes includes the reptiles. These are represented by turtles, tuataras, lizards, snakes, crocodilians, and birds. Reptiles share many derived characters, such as the presence of keratin-based scales to help protect against desiccation on land. Many reptiles will also lay shelled eggs in a terrestrial habitat. As a result, internal fertilization must occur prior to the deposition or formation of the eggshell. Most reptiles are ectothermic, however, birds are considered endothermic. Most reptiles will then use solar energy as their main source of body heat, which is much less energetically costly than using metabolic heat as we see in endotherms. Early reptiles, which are termed diapsids, appear in the fossil record about 310 million years ago. Diapsids are identified by having two holes behind their eyes for the attachment of jaw muscles. These holes are still present in all reptiles, however, they have been secondarily lost in turtles. Reptiles are now represented by three extant lineages: turtles, lepidosaurs, and archosaurs. As stated previously, turtles have secondarily lost the holes behind their eye sockets. However, early turtles will still have these holes present, confirming their diapsid evolution. It is believed that their shell evolved in a series of plates that were fused to the vertebrae. Turtles are also closely related to crocodiles as well as birds. Lepidosaurs are represented by tuataras, lizards, as well as snakes. Tuataras were widespread in the fossil record, however, they are now represented by only one species that is limited to New Zealand. Snakes have secondarily lost their limbs and are now classified as limbless lizards. Archosaurs are represented by crocodilians and birds. This lineage first appeared in the late Triassic period. Crocodilians have shown little change from their ancestral form. However, birds have shown major diversities in their body form as a result of their major adaptation for flight. Along with the evolution of flight, there are many other anatomical changes that occurred in the body structure of birds. Wings are considered to be highly modified versions of the tetrapod forelimb that are specialized for flight purposes. Along with the evolution of the wing, there were other adaptations, such as large pectoral muscles and the development of a keel bone for these muscles to attach to on the sternum. This provides the musculature and force necessary for flight. Feathers are considered to be keratin-based structures similar to scales. However, they have a central shaft that is filled with air that can radiate into the veins. This vein consists of a barb and hook-like structure. This allows for streamlining to also aid in the ability to fly. In addition, feathers will also help insulate the animal in a very lightweight manner. And finally, there were also structural changes in the overall bone structure. The bones of avians are honeycomb-like and filled with air, once again to decrease the body weight to allow for flight. Other weight-reducing adaptations include the loss or reduction of the urinary bladder, reduced gonads, and as well as the loss of teeth. This image is a depiction of Archaeopteryx, an ancestral bird species. Note the presence of a toothed beak, wing claw, as well as a tail. This is now lost in modern-day birds. The evolution of flight provided many advantages to species. This includes the increased ability to find prey or resources for scavenging, the ability to prey on insects as well as other flying animals that are not available to non-flight animals. In addition, it allows for escape from predation and the ability to migrate to new areas when resources become scarce. Many birds also share other derived characters, such as a highly efficient circulatory and respiratory system. Birds have air sacs present to improve air intake and distribution. This will help maximize oxygen transport to tissues, especially during flight. In addition, many birds will have sharp eyesight and fine motor control. This leads to the typical description of a bird brain, which leads to the enlargement of the visual and motor areas of the brain. Most birds will have internal fertilization prior to the formation of the eggshell. As a result, many birds will have elaborate courtship and mating rituals. In addition, they will deposit eggs which are kept warm by brooding by either the male or the female parent. It is believed that birds belong to a group of Saurischian dinosaurs called the theropods. Archaeopteryx, as seen below, is considered to be the first confirmed bird fossil. Recently unearthed fossils reveal a great amount of diversity in the structure of the feathers. This indicates that feathers may have evolved before flight. Feathers may have originally been important for defense purposes, insulation, courtship, as well as camouflage. Extant or modern-day birds belong to the Neornithes clade. This originated more than 66 million years ago. This includes extinct as well as flightless birds. Ratites includes the flightless birds such as emus and ostriches. Penguins are also considered flightless. However, when many of the bird species have secondarily lost their ability to fly, this is usually replaced by other adaptations, such as the penguin, which is adapted for swimming, or the emu or ostrich, which is adapted for running on land. The final group of tetrapods we will examine are the mammals. Remember, these are also considered to be amniotes. Mammals are typically characterized by the presence of hair as well as the ability to produce milk from mammary glands. Mammals also share many derived characters such as the presence of kidney for waste excretion, highly efficient cardiovascular and respiratory systems to support a high metabolic rate, enlarged regions of the brain for learning and higher level processing, and they also show variability in both the size and structure of teeth. Mammals are considered to be synapsids. This is because they possess an opening behind each eye socket. In addition, the hinge bones, specifically the quadrate and articular bones, are now reduced to small bones in the middle of the ear that is used for hearing as well as balance. Synapsids evolved into large herbivores and carnivores during the Permian period. However, they suffered a dramatic loss of diversity due to the Permian-Triassic extinctions. As a result, small mammal-like animals that were likely haired, endothermic, and laid eggs diversified. True mammals began to appear in the fossil record approximately 200 million years ago during the Jurassic period. After this, mammals showed distinct diversification and dominated the terrestrial landscape after the dinosaurs went extinct. 3 lineages are now represented. These are called the monotremes, marsupials, and eutherians. The monotremes include the egg-laying mammals such as a platypus and echidna. These animals have hair and will produce milk, however they lack nipples. Marsupials include the animals that give live birth, however the young must complete the embryonic development within a pouch on the female. These animals possess nipples and as well they form a placenta from the extraembryonic membranes. These include animals such as the opossum, kangaroo, and koalas. The eutherians include the full placental-bearing mammals. Because the embryo needs to complete its development using the placenta for nourishment, this leads for a more complex association between the mother and developing embryo. These three lineages of mammals represent the bulk of mammalian life that we see today. Please take a minute to review this slide to understand the diversity of mammals.